The Terran officer stared out the thick glass of the forward bay, watching the stars slide across the black like silver veins. War was never part of his mission. Captain Rourke had been sent as a diplomat, not a soldier. But now the stars told a different story. A week ago, the humans had approached the Jirari Empire with open hands. They had brought gifts, language data, and respect. The response came not in words, but in plasma fire. 3 ships burned before the humans could even raise shields. Rourke survived because his cruiser had been late. A systems failure had delayed their arrival. It saved his ship and Kirsten with command. With the fleet shattered, he was now the highest-ranking officer left near the edge of Jirari space. He never expected to be captured. But here he was, strapped to a cold chair inside a metallic chamber that pulsed with faint alien energy. His wrists ached. His throat was dry. And yet, the room was silent, too silent. As if something or someone was waiting. The door opened with a hiss. He expected guards. He expected pain. He did not expect her. She entered like a queen dressed for war. Her silver skin glowed faintly beneath the sharp lines of her high-tech armor. Long white hair cascaded down her back like a river of light. Her eyes glowing amber locked on him, not with hatred, but curiosity. She was tall, powerful, and terrifyingly calm. "You are the Terran who commands the survivors," she said. Her voice was soft, but carried like thunder. She walked around him slowly, like a lion circling prey. "You expected us to speak in peace. We do not speak to those who steal stars." Rourke forced his voice to stay firm. "We came to trade knowledge, not take territory. It was you who fired first. You call this peace?" She paused. Her expression did not change. "You stepped into our sky. That is all the reason we need." Silence grew between them. But beneath her calm, something flickered. A crack in the surface. She had not come to kill him. Not yet. He realized it in her. Steps measured, not aggressive. In her words sharp, but not cruel. "You are different from the others," she said. "You did not fire back immediately. You hesitated. That is rare in your kind. Maybe hesitation is the only thing keeping this from becoming extinction," he replied. He shifted in the chair, still bound, still alert. "What do you really want from me?" She tilted her head. Her fingers hovered near a control panel on the wall, but she did not press it. Instead, she walked closer. Her boots made soft clicks on the floor, closer still until she stood only inches from him. He could feel the energy radiating from her armor. "You are here to make me understand your kind," she whispered. "That is why I kept you alive. There is something in you I have not seen before, a softness. But softness can be a weapon too, can't it?" Rourke stared back. He felt the line between prisoner and guest blur with every second. She did not speak. Like a commander. She spoke like a woman who had lived too long behind orders and masks. "You don't want this war either," he said quietly. "Do you?" She looked at him, really looked. For a breath, her eyes softened. Then she turned away and walked to the door. Before leaving, she looked over her shoulder and said, "Tomorrow we begin your lessons. You will teach me what it means to be Terran, and I will show you what it means to stand alone under 1,000 suns." Then she was gone. The door sealed shut behind her with a cold hiss. And Rourke sat in the silence again, his thoughts racing faster than the stars outside. Had come expecting diplomacy and found himself in the hands of an alien commander more mysterious than war itself. And now, alone with her behind enemy lines, he realized the real battle was only just beginning. Asterisk. The next morning came without warning. No windows, no clock. Only the smooth hiss of the chamber door breaking the silence told Captain Rourke that time had passed. She entered again taller than he remembered, or perhaps it was the way she moved. Her armor gleamed beneath the lights, polished and flawless. In her hands, she held a thin rectangular device, glowing faintly. Her expression was unreadable. "Stand," she ordered. He didn't argue. The bindings on his chair released with a soft click, surprising him. He rose slowly, unsure whether to expect a strike or an order. But neither came. "You will walk beside. Me, do not run. Do not stray." "My guards are faster than your thoughts," she said. The corridor outside was silent, smooth, and too clean for a warship. It looked more like a temple carved from metal and light. As they walked, he noticed strange symbols etched into the walls. Alien text, curved and beautiful like flowing rivers. "Are these warnings?" he asked. She turned her head slightly. "Poetry. We mark our halls with the words of those who died too soon. Your ships carry banners and numbers. We carry memory in verses." They stopped in front of a wide glass chamber. Inside, holograms floated in the air, maps, ship diagrams, biology scans. It looked like a lab mixed with a war room. She gestured for him to enter. "You call yourselves human. We call you Narectile. It means flesh that burns but keeps walking," she said. "And what do you call yourselves?" Rourke asked as he stepped inside. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she tapped the device in her hand, and a large hologram of Earth appeared in the center of the room. She stared at it for a moment before replying, "We are Jirari. It means the ones who endure without question. Our name is our fate. We do not bend. We do not ask why. We survive and obey." Until now, there was something heavy in her voice, something not meant to slip out. Rourke didn't comment on it. He knew better than to point out cracks in a soldier's mask. Instead, he turned to the projection of Earth. "You've studied us. Even before the attack," he said. "Yes, we knew what you were before you reached our borders. You smile and offer peace, but peace always hides teeth. We thought we struck first to avoid being bitten. But you surprised us. You did not bite back. That's why you are here. And if I fail to convince you, then I return to obeying." "And you return to dying," she said without emotion. Rourke stepped closer to the projection. He saw the continents, the cities, the oceans. It was strange to see home from an alien's eyes. Strange to see it framed like a target instead of a birthplace. "You want to understand humans. But you won't learn from maps or data. You'll learn from stories, from mistakes. From moments no scanner can catch," he said. She walked to the other side of the room, arms crossed. Her expression had changed again. Not softer, just less cold. "Then teach me," she said. Rourke looked at her. Really looked. Not at the armor or her title or the weapons hidden in the walls, but at the woman who stood too straight, who spoke too perfectly, who wore silence like armor. She had not chosen war. She had only followed its call. He nodded. "I will teach you about humans, but only if you teach me about you." For a moment, there was no sound. Then, with a short nod, she agreed. And just like that, the prisoner and the commander stood on equal ground, each with a truth the other needed. Behind the walls, the war still waited. But in that chamber, something else had begun. Not peace, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of something that could hold the shape of peace. Her voice broke the silence one last time. "Tomorrow, I will show you where we were born, and you will tell me why you chose to be kind in a moment made for anger." Then she left the chamber without another word, and Rourke was alone again, not in chains, but in thought. The next day arrived without any announcement. The lights in his room brightened slowly, just enough to wake him without sound. No guards came to escort him. No orders echoed from the ceiling. The door simply slid open. She waited outside, arms behind her back, dressed in the same sleek armor but with less tension in her posture. For the first time, Rourke saw her not as a commander, but as someone burdened with command. "You said you'd show me where you were born," he said. She nodded. "Follow me. No sudden moves. There are still those who see you as prey. They walked through the silent halls again, passing doors that hissed open and closed without touch. Rourke noticed that other Jarari now watched him as he passed. Some stared with suspicion, others with curiosity. None spoke. They entered a large chamber that opened into a dome. Above them, a projection of stars rotated slowly across the ceiling. Below, a holographic world glowed in orange and red tones. It looked volcanic, dangerous, barely habitable. "This is Jira, our home world," she said. The image zoomed in, revealing massive stone structures built around rivers of molten rock. Beasts the size of ships moved across ridges. Storms crackled. Above jagged peaks. It was a world of survival, not comfort. "You were born here?" Rourke asked. She nodded. "I was born in the southern craters where storms never stop. My skin burned before I learned to walk. My voice cracked before I could speak, but I endured. We all did. That is why we do not trust easily. Nothing in our world was ever given. Everything had to be taken." Rourke stepped closer to the projection. He saw children training with weapons. He saw elders standing in circles of fire, chanting words he couldn't understand. He saw a people shaped by pain, not by choice. "Your world taught you to fear strangers," he said. "Our world taught us to destroy them before they destroy us," she corrected. They stood in silence for a while. Then she tapped the device in her hand again, and a new image appeared. It was her years younger, training with 2 blades against 3 opponents. Even then, her movements were precise and deadly. "I was chosen for command not because I was the strongest, but because I never stopped moving forward," she said. Rourke looked at her, not the projection. "And yet you stopped the execution order for me. You broke your pattern." She turned to him. Her gaze was steady, but her voice had a hint of steel beneath it. "Do not mistake curiosity for weakness. I have not broken anything. I only paused the knife to see why it was not needed. But maybe the knife was never needed," he replied. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. Instead, she led him down another hallway, narrower than the rest. The walls here were darker, less polished. They arrived at a door that looked older than any other in the ship. This chamber was used by the first Jarari to travel beyond our system. "It has not been touched in years," she said. The door opened with a loud creak. Inside was a small room filled with old flight suits, cracked helmets, and faded flags. On the wall, symbols were carved deep into metal. Rourke couldn't read them, but he knew they were important. "What does it say?" he asked. She looked at the writing for a long moment before speaking. "It says, 'We reach for the stars not to conquer, but to never kneel again.'" Rourke let those words settle in his mind. They weren't words of aggression. They were words of survival, of freedom, of fear buried under pride. "You don't want to rule us," he said. "You just don't want to be ruled." She didn't deny it. She just turned and walked out, leaving him alone in the quiet memory of a people who had fought too long to trust anyone's peace. He followed her back through the halls, but the silence between them was different now. Not cold, not hostile, just thoughtful. Something had shifted when they reached his chamber again. She paused before letting him go. "Tomorrow, I will ask about your world. Not your leaders, not your weapons. I want to know how your people live when they are not at war." Then she left. Without another word, and for the first time since his capture, Rourke felt like something more than a prisoner. He felt like a bridge in the making, one step away from becoming something history had never allowed before. The next morning, the door opened without a sound, but this time, Rourke was already awake. He had barely slept. Not because of fear, but because of what he felt forming between them. It wasn't trust yet, not peace, but a thread stretched between 2 people on opposite sides of a war. She stood at the doorway, holding 2 objects in her hand. One was a tablet-like device. The other was a small black box. I want to know what your people eat, she said without expression. Rourke blinked. Eat? Yes. You said understanding begins with life, not power. Show me your life, she replied. He took the box and opened it. Inside were a few sample standard survival rations carried by most Terran ships. Dried protein squares, vitamin gels, grain biscuits. He held one up. This is food for travel. Not for pleasure, he said. She nodded and walked to the center of the room, where a low table had been prepared. On her side, she placed a small dish filled with glowing green strips. The scent was sharp, but not unpleasant. This is olvan root. It grows in the caverns of our third moon. It is poisonous to most species. To us, it heals and sharpens the mind, she explained. Rourke hesitated before placing one of his protein squares beside it. The two foods looked like they came from different universes. This tastes like cardboard, he admitted, and this burns the tongue if swallowed too fast, she said. They sat across from each other, food between them, war around them. Rourke took a bite of the root and nearly coughed. His throat tightened, but he swallowed. Sharp, he said, trying not to wince. Your face suggests pain. That is good. It means it's working, she said with a rare hint of amusement. He smiled. It was the first time she had come close to humor. He offered her a piece of the protein square. She took it, examined it carefully, then placed it on her tongue. Her face remained still for 3 seconds before she spoke. This tastes like regret, she said. They both laughed, soft and brief, but real. In that moment, they weren't commander and prisoner. They were simply two people trying to make sense of each other's worlds. After the meal, she stood and motioned him to follow. They entered a smaller room filled with screens showing Terran cities, families, celebrations, and streets. Rourke stepped forward, surprised. You've been watching us, he said. We study what we fear, she replied. One screen showed a mother holding her child under a cherry blossom tree. Another showed two teenagers racing hover bikes through an open field. There were no weapons, no soldiers, no war. Why these moments? He asked. Because I have seen your soldiers. I wanted to see your souls, she answered. He turned to her. And what do you see? She looked at the screen, then at him. I see a people desperate to matter. You build fast. You move fast, you burn bright. But your roots are shallow. That frightens me more than your weapons, Rourke didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. Humanity did run fast toward everything progress. Conflict, ambition. But they also ran fast toward hope. He pointed at the image of the mother and child. That is why we build. So they can rest. So they don't have to run, she didn't respond. But she looked longer at the screen, eyes narrowed as if trying to memorize something important. After a long silence, she spoke again. My people do not rest. Not truly. Even our dreams are filled with fire. Then maybe you dream too hard, Rourke sighed. She turned sharply, but there was no anger in her movement. Only thought. Perhaps. Or perhaps we fear that if we stop burning, we disappear. They stood there, side by side, not as enemies but as reflections of each other's scars. She didn't speak again as she led him back to his chamber. But when they reached the door, she paused. Tomorrow you will see what we lost before the war began. Then you will understand why peace feels like surrender to us. She walked away, leaving him with the memory of her voice and the scent of olvan root still sharp in his mouth. And for the first time since this began, Rourke didn't want to escape. He wanted to stay. Not to survive, but to understand what lived behind the cold eyes of the alien who had once been his enemy. The chamber was darker than the others. The lights were dimmed on purpose. Rourke stepped inside slowly, unsure what kind of truth waited for him today. She was already inside. Her armor was gone, replaced with a dark robe stitched with silver threads. It was the first time he saw her without a shell of war wrapped around her body. Sit, she said quietly. He obeyed. The room had no screens, no weapons, no maps. Only a small sphere rested between them on a pedestal, pulsing with faint green light. This is a memory orb. It stores events directly from the mind. What you see inside, it is not filtered or edited. It is truth recorded through the eyes of the one who lived it, she explained. She placed her hand on the sphere. The green light spread and thickened into an image above them. Rourke saw a city massive, proud, alive. Towers made of white stone rose into a sky filled with two suns. Children played on platforms floating in the air. Music echoed across the plazas. This was Gera, 10 years ago, she said. He watched. As the scene changed, fire streaked through the sky. The towers cracked, then crumbled. People ran. Screams followed. Smoke blackened the sky. The camera, her eyes shook as she moved through the chaos, helping civilians escape. What happened? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. The image above shifted to show massive ships descending, not Shirari, but from another alien race. Tall, red-skinned beings in bone armor swept through the city. They slaughtered without warning. No message. No reason. We called them the Karen. We never found out where they came from. They vanished after a single strike. Left nothing but wreckage and questions, she said. Why would they do this? Rourke asked. Because we looked strong. And strong is always a threat to the weak-hearted. She answered. The memory faded. The light returned to green. She pulled her hand away, and the orb dimmed. I lost 2 sisters that day. I buried my father with my own hands. I was given command the following week. No ceremony. Just a command code and a list of targets, she said. Rourke sat quietly. There was nothing to say that could erase what he had seen. But he understood. Her coldness now. It was armor forged from fire and loss. We thought we were alone in the stars. When we found others, we hoped they would understand pain. Instead, we saw smiles hiding knives. When you arrived, we thought the blade would come. Next, she continued. But it didn't, Rourke said. No, it didn't. And that's why I brought you here. To show you that we were not always like this. We once danced in the sunlight like your children do now, she replied. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was sacred. It held something fragile that neither of them wanted to break. Rourke leaned forward slightly. My people would grieve with you if they knew this. We have known destruction too. Maybe not the same enemy. But the same pain. Pain is the only universal language we all speak, she said. They stood together. She looked taller again, but not because of armor. This time, it was the weight of her truth that made her seem larger. Tomorrow, she said, I will take you to the place where the war with your kind began. Not in fire, but in silence. You must see it to understand why we fear peace with those who move too fast and ask too little. Then I'll go. Rourke replied. He followed her out of the chamber. As they walked, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Some truths no longer required explanation. Back in his room, Rourke sat alone and stared at his hands. He wasn't sure if he still wanted to return to Earth. He wasn't sure if Earth would even recognize him after this. He had come as a diplomat, then a prisoner. Now he felt like something in between. A listener, a witness, maybe even a beginning. And outside his chamber, the alien commander who once hated his kind stood alone in the hallway, thinking of things she had never told anyone before. The shuttle hummed as it moved across the sky of the second moon. Rourke sat beside her, strapped in, quiet. The window beside him showed a barren land, pale and broken, filled with the remains of old machinery and shattered towers. This was our hope, she said without turning her head. The shuttle touched down in the center of a massive crater. Around them were the bones of a forgotten city, half buried in dust. Shattered domes, twisted walkways, broken statues of winged figures, all silent reminders of what once was. We built this place to welcome the stars, a neutral city, a peaceful space for new visitors, she explained. And what happened here? Rourke asked. She stepped down from the shuttle and motioned for him to follow. They walked across cracked ground, their boots crunching the dust. A thin wind blew through the ruins, carrying the scent of rust and time. We sent signals out to the galaxies. We welcomed trade, conversation, unity. For 5 years, no one came. And then a Terran ship arrived, she said. Rourke stopped. Terran? R. You sure? She nodded. It carried your colors. It bore your language. They told us they were here in peace. We let them in. She led him to a large circular structure. Inside, the walls had been scorched. Burn marks stretched up the columns. In the center lay the remains of a broken console. Once used for communications, they downloaded our data, maps, structure codes. We showed them everything. Then, during a ceremony, the power grid exploded. Fires spread. We lost over 400 scholars and children in one day, she said. Rourke felt a deep heaviness settle in his chest. That wasn't an official mission. There's no record of any sanctioned contact here, I believe you. But belief does not erase fire, she said. She knelt and brushed her hand over a blackened mark on the floor. This was where my mentor died. She had written the treaty we never got to sign. Rourke crouched beside her. The ground was cold, but the memory was still warm in her voice. We thought your people betrayed us. We retreated. Closed our borders. Built weapons. I joined the military 1 week later. I promised I would never be fooled again, she said, and I promised I would never let my people become the kind we once fought against. Rourke replied. They stood again. The wind howled through the ruin like a ghost made of regret. Far in the distance, old satellite dishes leaned sideways, forgotten and rusted. You said you feared our speed. Maybe what you feared was how quickly we can break trust, he said. She looked at him. This time, there was no anger in her eyes. Only something close to sorrow. Something she had buried for years but could not keep down anymore. I have hated your kind for so long that I forgot what it felt like not to, she said, and I never knew what you had lost. Until now, Rourke answered. They returned to the shuttle. In silence, but something inside the silence had changed. Not emptiness. Not distance. Something more like space made ready for something new. As the shuttle lifted off, she spoke again. I want you to speak to our council. I want them to see what I've seen. You want peace? He asked. I want truth. If peace comes with it, I won't. Reject it, she said. He nodded. Then I will speak. They flew across the sky, back toward the Jirari command ship. The sun of the moon set slowly, painting the horizon in deep orange and violet. Rourke looked at the alien woman beside him and saw not an enemy, not even a commander, but someone who had suffered and survived. Back in his chamber, he found a small object placed on the table. It was a crystal cube engraved with both Terran letters and Jirari symbols. It read, Voice without fear. He understood the message. Tomorrow he would speak not as a prisoner, not as a soldier, but as a bridge between two worlds still trembling from the weight of history. And somewhere in the silent halls, she stood at a window, watching the stars she had once vowed to fight against, now wondering if they could hold something more than war. The council chamber was carved into the heart of the Jirari ship. High arches formed from black steel rose above them like the ribs of a great beast. Glowing blue threads lined the walls, humming softly with energy. Rourke stood alone in the center, surrounded by 12 figures in armor far older and heavier than the commanders. Each one carried years of war across their shoulders, and none of them looked friendly. She stood at his side, but said nothing. Today, her voice was not his shield. Today, she would let him speak alone. You are not invited here, one of the counselors sighed. No, I wasn't, Rourke replied without fear. You were taken as a prisoner of war. You remain one. And yet you speak, another added. I speak because the one who captured me chose understanding over execution. Because the one you call commander chose to see instead of strike. And I speak because this silence between us has lasted too long, Rourke answered. The room remained still. No nods, no whispers. Only listening. You believe we are dangerous. I won't lie. We are. We move fast. We expand fast. But not to destroy. We build because we are afraid of being left behind. We reach because standing still feels like death. To us, he said. And what do you reach for now? The eldest among them asked. Not your land. Not your skies. Just the chance to stop losing people on both sides, he replied. You claim innocence, yet our dead remain buried under Terran stars. Another counselor growled. And yours lie beneath our moons. Does counting the dead make the living less worthy? Of peace? Rourke asked. Silence followed his words. He saw their shoulders shift, their eyes narrow. But none of them spoke yet. The woman who brought me here lost her home, her family, her hope. She could have turned that loss into more war. Instead, she turned it into a question. Is there another way? That question deserves an answer, he said. The commander finally spoke, her voice low but firm. I brought him here because we forgot how to listen. We thought fear kept us safe. But fear has only kept us alone. You broke protocol, a counselor reminded her. I followed something older than orders. I followed survival. And survival no longer lives in the blade. It lives in the bridge, she answered. Rourke stepped forward. If you want war, I won't stop you. But if even one of you believes there's a path forward that doesn't end in fire, then let me carry your message to Earth. Let me open the door on both sides. You would risk your life carrying words from those who once tried to kill you? The eldest asked. Yes, because dying with purpose is better than surviving with hate. Rourke replied. A long pause stretched across the chamber. Then slowly one counselor lowered his hand. Then another. Then a third. Until only one remained. Still, let the Terran speak for us. But let his words carry truth, not weakness, the final counselor said before lowering his hand. It will be done, said the eldest. Rourke bowed his head once. Not in submission, but in respect. Later that evening, back in the command deck, the stars stretched wide before them again. She stood beside him, not as a guard, not as a warden, but as an equal. You changed their minds, she said. No, I reminded them they still had minds to change, he replied. She looked out into the stars. Her face was softer now, no longer carved. From duty, when you return to your people, will you tell them the truth? Every part of it, he said. And if they reject it? Then I try again. Until someone listens, he answered. She placed a small device into his hand. It contained every recording, every word, every moment they had shared. It was the truth, sealed in memory. For your people. And mine, she said. He nodded and stepped toward the transport vessel waiting in the bay. As the doors began to close, he looked back one last time. She raised her hand. Not in salute, not in command, but in farewell. And as the ship carried him back toward the Terran fleet, Captain Rourke realized something strange had happened during his captivity. He had not only survived behind enemy lines. He had helped create something no war had ever left behind: hope.